Thanks, Ciprian. And hello, everyone. Nice to see you all again. I just want to quickly build on what Ciprian said about my speakers today, because I think it's quite an interesting panel. We have Lars and Ercin, both have extensive experience in corporate venturing, but what I ask both of them today is to blend perspectives from both the corporate and the startup world. So as Ciprian said, Lars is joining us from Berlin. He's bringing over 20 years of experience in consulting and corporate venturing. He started his career early on with Boston Consulting Group, and then he built venture capital units for larger corporations, and now is part of BSH Startup Kitchen. For someone that doesn't know what BSH stands for, it's Bosch Siemens Home Appliance Group. So it's one of the largest manufacturing company in the world. Ercin is also joining with and bringing a lot of experience from corporate venturing. He was a former director of global operations for Rocket Internet. And he was in charge there for opening the Africa office, I believe, Ercin. And at that time, I can imagine, was even a more nascent ecosystem than is right now. But also what's interesting, so Ercin is running his own company called Lydia. It's a fintech lending platform for small, medium-sized enterprises. And that's why I asked Ercin today to try to wear his founder hat more than anything and try to compare some opinions and perspectives. Just very briefly before we get started, for anyone that is joining us right now, what we want to dive in today is more about how innovation has been changing. In the last 20 years, organizations have had to navigate loads of challenging market events. We had the burst of the dot-com bubble, then the financial crisis. Some regard Brexit as a very unfortunate event, but some people say that what's happening right now that has no precedent. So I just want to start with a very basic, simple question to both of you, Ercin and Lars, and just want to know, what does innovation mean to you? And from your experience of running your own company and being part of your corporations, what has changed and how priorities have shifted before and after COVID?
Who do you want to go first?
Well, you said it, Lars. Go on.
Thank you. All right, I'll just give it a shot. But Jana, thank you so much for that super nice introduction, and thanks for having me today in the panel. And I think it's a pleasure with the three of you. I mean, when you think about innovation, one thing which is for sure that there have been many disruptions along the way, but one thing is pretty clear, that innovation is speeding up and getting more intense in a way, and has become more intense over the past decades, right? And if you think about what that means for the corporate world, it is that, and I mean, corporates are built to repeatedly do stuff in a great way. So they're good in doing what they can do. But as we all know, corporates might not be the best ones to reinvent themselves every other year. And I'm not saying that corporates need to reinvent themselves, but they need to rethink what they're doing even more intensively than they had to do in the past. And that's what, to me, that was your question, innovation is all about. It's about rethinking, pushing the boundaries and the barriers of what you do right now to create more value to everyone, to your customers, to your employees, to your suppliers, all of your stakeholders. And that's what's, I guess, driving all economies all around the world. And that's, I guess, why we are all in this game and trying to push these boundaries.
And Lars, you are working at BSH Startup Kitchen with a lot of startups, and I can imagine some of these interactions are obviously physical, happening in person. How have you rechanged or restructured your programs since COVID?
No, actually not really. Actually, most of the programs we've been doing had been virtual before, because we work with startups from all around the globe, with everyone within our company all around the globe. So it never really made sense to bring people, fly in people. Actually, we did.
Well, say that to most of the accelerators that are running still on site. So
maybe we do it a bit differently, because we do it project driven. But for one project, you don't need to. You got to be shipping goods or materials, prototypes. That's for sure. But other than that, I think there will be long-term effects on how we will see programs like these being managed in the future, I guess. Sure. More remote, more virtual, more flexible as well.
Yep. Perfect. Thank you. I will have loads of things to build upon that, but I know there's many questions coming, so I will link it to the next section. Ercin, you are primarily focusing on Africa, which is a quite exciting startup ecosystem right now, developing very fast. What does innovation mean to you? And with Lydia and your company, how have things changed?
Thanks a lot for having me today, Diana, and thanks for the kind introduction. And for the case of innovation, I look at it two ways, like either you take the existing technologies and you combine them in a better way that creates a better experience for the society or for the users, such as with the iPhone. They were using existing technologies, they just bundled it with a new product. Now it created a smartphone era, or you can basically develop the technologies itself and bring completely new products, such as with the hope of COVID-19 as it's relevant affects everybody in the world, with BioNTech doing the mRNA technology. That's a completely new technology to develop. In that case, that's how I look at it, innovation.
New product.
And in terms of how we look at in Africa, the experience was because those are young nations, they need a lot of infrastructure, a lot of things in place. Therefore, when it comes to innovation, you need to take into account the circumstances and the environment of the society and the countries or the continent, where we basically saw an opportunity to be able to bring e-commerce, which can even more value parts of that, moving transparency and selection of goods. And when you do the e-commerce, it even brings more value outside of major cities, because with the click of a button, people can use. But that being said, you also need that cheap smartphones to be available to the customers, which started to become available in the last 7-8 years, and as well as deeper penetration of 3G. So in that case, the innovation, to back to the question, is looking at the existing sometimes technologies or existing infrastructure, and to be able to provide a better quality service or better product to the society or to the users.
Yes, and actually your point about making things more of a commodity and the fact that it's much cheaper right now to launch any products and do much more with less. It's interesting going back to this kind of overview, I guess, or comparison between corporations and startups. Many corporations have started, I think, to realize that if they don't act or act now or fast and fast, they will soon probably become irrelevant. If you look at, in almost probably every category, larger brands are losing market share to smaller incumbents. And back to your point, Ercin, I think in the current day and age, it's, the cost of launching a new brand has dropped considerably from, I don't know, $1 million to maybe $20K, right? In that regards, do you, now speaking about your experience of working with corporations, do you think the current pandemic is likely to deepen relationships between startups and corporations, or is it going to make them scarce?
It's a very good point. there is a good saying, will the incumbents find innovation before the newcomers find distribution? So that's always a battle between large companies and newcomers. But overall, when we look at it from the dynamics of the society, competition always is good, because in the sense that it just creates more efficient products or a better cheaper products or better quality products for the society. So that I see it always as a good for the society ultimately. But that being said, every company plays its own part. For me, I have a lot of respect to large companies, because they were small companies at some point in time. It can be centuries ago or decades ago. But that being said, they have the size and scale, and therefore certain things, it is requires a different kind of approach when you develop products, in terms of liabilities can be, and as well as the customer base that you have. So in that case, what I see is becoming more and more norm is partnering with startups, because as a startup, you have the agility, and usually as a startup, what we see as the successful models is you focus on a niche first, where you provide in a niche area a great service that most other companies cannot provide, and you get bigger and bigger. And while doing that, like you get recognized by the larger companies, you partner with them, and then it takes a life of its own. And this kind of things we see, I do like with Lydia, as you pointed out, we give financing to small and medium businesses. We partner with a lot of like financial institutions because they have like the customers and the know-how and like certain things that are unique to them. And where we come in is we just use data, we take no collateral, no guarantor, and we can underwrite these like small and medium businesses and give access to finance that they will not get otherwise. And it creates a win-win situation because at the end, it's their customer, is our customer as well. And it's just we serve in the different end of the spectrum. Those kind of innovations I see is becoming much more norm. And from the larger corporations as well, like they are taking a proactive approach in my experience as the startup founder.
Yeah, I think you're perfectly right. I think when startups and corporates actually choose their partners wisely, I think that's actually very important as well. I realize when does it make sense for such relationship to happen, and they do get aligned on the highest level. Then these collaborations, essentially become a catalyst for growth. But one interesting thing that's been happening, and now I'm kind of turning towards Lars, is that with this crisis, and a lot of people talk about financial recession, many businesses are actually reducing their investment in innovation. And they're thinking about mostly cost cutting, which most of the time also revolves around laying off a lot of people. But we also know from loads of studies and even practical examples from the past that during this kind of difficult times, usually the companies that are coming out of recessions and they've invested in innovation, they come more of a, I guess they're thriving during these times compared to others that they haven't. In your view, Lars, what type of innovation do you think they'll come forward, especially after COVID?
It's a good one, and maybe to start with, like, I fully subscribe to what you were just saying, right? So innovation is not really like a luxury item that you can afford as a corporate. It's a must-have, right? So if you stop investing in innovation, you stop getting better. If you stop getting better, you actually are getting worse. And in doing that in times of crisis, it's really a bad choice, because you can really suffer badly and lose and get behind competition. And this also like comes back to what Ercin was saying. It's not about really trying to compete with startups, but there's so much value you can do by finding the right partner that fill a competence gap that you have as a corporate. There's so many technologies emerging, and I'll come to that in a minute, what these ones will be, that you as a corporate, you cannot tackle all by yourself. You have your great assets, you have your great employees, your structures, your processes, and they help you to do what you're good in. And for us, it's like developing high quality products, market them in the right way with market channel access, and that's really actually impossible for a startup to copy in the short, mid, or even long term. But and that would also be the wrong approach from a startup, to compete with us. It's more about finding the right partner. How can you work together to make it a real big success in the most efficient way? So the innovations that we currently see coming up, of course, there might be twofold, and this whole crisis which is very different from all the other. It's not a financial crisis. It's like a social, like a society impacting crisis. So we behave very differently than we used to. It's not just like people are getting unemployed. We have like social distancing. We stay at home, less traveling, and so there's a shift in market requirements and customer behavior, and that is there to last, right? I mean, we all know from our own experience, I can say, at least Ercin and I, we're all doing this from home. Deanne, I don't know, that doesn't look like your home, but at least
most of the time I'm at home. This is just an exception. I would love to call this my home, but no, most of the time I'm at home.
And I think no one can imagine, it's hard to imagine commuting again an hour every day back and forth, even longer, and that is there to last. So there will be new innovations in the way we work together and new tools coming up. That's something we actively push. To us, innovation not only product related, but also the way we work together, how we collaborate as a team. And we see online collaboration tools, yeah, like there's so many things, conferencing tools, conferencing apps. So how do you, and there's much more to do. And we all know like working from home is not the real thing as working with your team. I miss my team members and my colleagues. I hope they miss me too. And there's got to be a way to reinvigorate that team spirit somehow. And of course, lastly, like we're like in the when you think about customer behavior, we already see that there's a huge trend in the way people actually organize their daily lives, the way they like we do home appliances, so we care very much about how people cook and do their like run their errands. So we actively observe that, of course, home delivery is getting an extra push. The way that people react or like will plan their days is also totally different. And there are also many opportunities for us, like together with the right partners, to tap into these fields, how to make, and that's actually the vision of BSH, like improve the quality of our consumers' lives. And there's so much that we will see happening there, I guess.
Absolutely. And I will probably leave this question more towards the end, but I tend to ask these questions in a lot of panels recently about what sort of startup trends or what trends in your field you see emerging. But let's come back to that afterwards, because I just want to build quickly on that point, Lars, about different types of innovation and how things are changing. But most importantly, one thing to highlight, and I'm not going to share this publicly, but we had a conversation yesterday, which was quite interesting, about innovation theater and failures. And where I want to get to a point with this is that I think in the last decade, the adoption of corporate venturing, and what I mean by that, it could be from CVCs or corporate venture capital to M&A, partnering with startups, accelerators, incubators, or even building your own kind of opportunistic ventures. They've exploded, right? So it's an uprising trend. But despite all this growth, there's been also recent studies that show that a majority of this actually fail. Or did not get the desirable results. Why do you think that is? I mean, where do you see, and this is actually a question for both of you, where do you see as the main barriers for basically impeding innovation happen?
I'm happy to go first, maybe, and just
please.
One comment on the question, like if you think about innovation, it's always risky. So if you have like 100 innovation projects and 100 of them actually are a success, something's not right? So you got to be willing to take risks to push the barriers and the boundaries. And so there's, as you were saying, like only one quarter makes it. I think it must be much less, right? I mean, in reality, maybe people will not tell you if you run a study or like ask them. But I mean, failure is part of the process. Maybe that's something you have to acknowledge and you got to live with. But of course, like the better you run your process, the better you focus on what you want to get out of the collaboration between startups and a corporate, the better will be the result, the lower will be that failure rate. And that's what we all strive to do. One key thing I think you have to keep in mind, or you got to be sure about when you start a collaboration with a startup, is like, what do you want to get out of it, and be transparent about it. And also be fair about your goals that you want to are trying to follow. If you I've seen that in the past, and sometimes I come across this even now, is that corporates try to, in a way, find out what startups are up to, right? So, and are not really interested in like a real deep long-term collaboration. That's the wrong way to do it, because it will not help you anyways. Just to know what someone is up to that you're not able to build anyways yourself, it's a waste of time on your side, and it's a waste of time with the startup. Everyone will be unhappy. And maybe the second part is like, if you really want to make this happen, like to bring startup innovation into the corporate world, and that's something we do as a corporate, you gotta build the right preconditions, the right setup to make this as easy and as, in a way, also fun as possible. When you have a startup and a corporate team meeting in a project, it's really like two worlds colliding. They like talk different languages. They talk about different speed, time, everything. So you need some kind of like a translator, like mitigator in between, who takes care of that. that's maybe the key thing, to at least for the initial way to work together, have someone who is taking care of building relationship. Of course, like startups need to be professional. They got to be as good as they can be. I mean, it's not a playground. It's all business in the end. But there's like, when you structure things right, if you get the processes right, a bit more startup friendly, at least for the beginning, as I was saying, to get the onboarding right, it's so much easier to make a long-term success. But just I mean, I think we've all seen so many startup collaborations because just people were not able to talk to each other, and someone really helping them to sort out any conflicts if they were out there.
Yeah, I think actually way too often we see this kind of collaborations just failing, and suddenly there's just a bleak trajectory moving forward. And I think it's that misalignment that you talked about in the KPIs. And we also have to admit that these collaborations just don't make sense for everyone. And I think that's it's so important to have the right stage of the startup. And if it's the first time you're running a collaboration with a company, with a larger corporation, I think there's a steep learning curve. So just from speaking to other innovation managers, they do often tend to look for, obviously, more mature startups that they've run collaborations or pilots in the past.
Same here. I mean, no doubt, like the more mature, the better. But it doesn't mean that, like, it doesn't really come, like, maturity doesn't always depend on the
past experience. But
it's not about just the company. It's also about the people in the company.
Exactly.
If you have like a young company with like a great team and they have experience, like a good mix of experience, that's also awesome. Like, it's about really being professional, and that doesn't mean how much funding you have in your bank. That always helps to get the right people. But I mean, being professional, being on time, delivering quality, that's key for a startup.
Ercin, would you like to add something to that?
Yes, I mean, I will maybe give a bit of the perspective from my experiences, like the startup side, how we interact with the mainly CVCs. Please. I mean, to the point that Lars mentioned, like because you are engaging with well-established, like reputable organizations, they have like certain expectations, how they can plug in your product from many perspectives. This can be from the product perspective, legal perspective, which can get quite complicated, and even like stakeholder management, because in the startup you have 2-3 key people. Like once you get the yes, that's done. But in a corporate world, there are many stakeholders, like depending on the product, depending on the area. So in that regard, like what we see is usually like companies that are already maybe Series A or Series B level and beyond are a better fit to collaborate with like large corporations, because you need to more or less figure out your product market fit. And as well as like you need to have like a well organized like execution capability, where things are more or less like structured from process point of view, which is the same thing from the VC world as well. Like not only corporate venture world, but even in the VC world, like for a business to succeed, you need to have a good product market fit, and you need to have like good execution. And also, like in my view, like failure is completely good, like as a culture, because even in the VC world, like that's why they encourage like fail fast and quick. So therefore, like you can come up with another idea or another company, but you shouldn't be lingering on the same thing over like 5+ years if it is not gaining traction. So that kind of culture is also like encouraging people to try. And by trying, it fosters innovation, because of the fact that if you are not scared, like if you fail, like this is the end game for you, but you are encouraged to even like to try new things down the line. That is very important. Of course, how you fail is very important as well. Like in this scenario, we always read about successful companies. We don't read about companies that fail. But as long as like you did fail because there's not product market fits, like in that regard, I think people can always take it. But if it is like more about execution or like team leadership, that creates more the like challenging questions down the line. But overall, like with the corporate world, back to the corporate world, where we see like successful ones from as a startup is like when we are grown a bit more and you have like more expertise down the line, that you can do stakeholder management, and as well as like how to say, a good product market fit. You just need more distribution, more scale, because of the like corporate ventures. They have a lot of expertise in their area, and they also have the distribution, so which creates a win-win for both sides.
I just also, Ciprian just mentioned, and I'm just going to also announce it to everyone, that we actually have more time. So if both of you are okay to stay with me for maybe another 20 minutes, that would be great. We also have questions from the public. But I actually just, and if I may take a bit more time, I just want quickly to build on what Ercin said about failure. And this is probably not so much related to our conversation, but I just feel that it's worth making a point, because we haven't really structured this conversation specifically on a region. But with Future Summit, it's based out of Romania and is covering mostly Europe and Central Eastern Europe. I think failure is something that we don't really see very often in this part of Europe. I think it's also a problem of mindset and culture. But failure is likely to, and also Lars, you said it. I mean, the more you do these pilots, the more you do this execution and projects, it's very likely to come. And it's very likely just to, it's a likely outcome when you talk about scaling. But a well-executed experiment, I think, can lead to a lot of positive effects. I think the best example I can give is Google Wave. I mean, the amount of times they've tried and they failed to get that product out of the market, it's incredible. So failing fast, I think, is okay. And when we talk about, especially nascent startup ecosystem, even if we regard Central Eastern Europe or Eastern Europe or Africa, I think it's actually probably one of the most important ingredients that you need in the early beginnings.
Maybe adding on to that, I think Phil, I fully agree with what you're saying, but you got to think about the second life of whatever you created in that failure, right? So if you fail fast, I don't like the term too much. It's like you fail and you stop, and it shouldn't be like that. So you got to be thinking, how can you use the things that you created, and you created something, and maybe didn't have product market fit, as Ercin was rightly saying, that, or there must be some reason, or maybe there was a problem in execution, but there is something. So either it's within the assets, within the IP, with the idea overall, or within the team, right? So there is something, and then think about the second life, what to do with it next. Not only write lessons learned on a PowerPoint slide and have one workshop with it, and that's it. But think about how you can also like transport the message. If you have a failure, like within a corporate, like it's a big project and it's not going anywhere, and then all of a sudden you stop talking about it, people will still continue talking about that failure, right? So it's about also storytelling of that failure, or like of that not yet successful ideas or not yet successful teams that you got to be managing. Otherwise, it would have been a waste of effort and waste of money and time on every side. You got to think, what do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
And maybe if it's a full failure, that's okay too, but that shouldn't be the standard.
I think it's also about sharing. I think you guys both know the concept of fuck up nights, which is all about talking about failure, right? So you're not just going on a stage and start bragging about the success. I think it's way more difficult for people to really learn from that. But when you talk about and you know exactly why that happened, why failure occurred, then I think it's 10 times more useful for you, because obviously it's introspective, you're thinking, you're reflecting, but also for people hearing you. We need to bring that concept more in this part of Europe. I don't think we have it enough. Moving on to, we can actually regard this as one of corporate venturing activities, I guess. And I'm moving into this direction because I know both of your backgrounds, and I think it's quite interesting for everyone listening to dive a bit more into venture building, if it's internal or external, because I think a lot of innovative corporations they increasingly understand that when we talk about disruptive innovation, so what I mean by that is not just about optimizing, current processes or solutions, or is more about future growth to some extent, that you can even build something outside of your corporation or outside of your core business model. And that is probably a way of not just optimizing costs, but it's also about long-term market share, gaining market share, or avoiding any market share stagnation. But a lot of corporations can't really respond to this sort of changing and emerging trends from within. But venture studios, especially partnering with someone externally, could potentially be a solution to that. And I'm turning first towards you, Ercin, and now this time just where you're kind of former Rocket Internet hat. What do you think that, or do you think that startup studios, and what sort of structure of startup studios do you think would be sort of more prominent, or is venture studios as a whole something to go about it to drive this R&D commercialization to market and achieve a head start for these corporations compared to their competitive players?
Yeah, it's a very good point, Diana. I mean, overall, like how I look at it is like all these startup accelerators, incubators, they're a net positive for the ecosystem because it nurtures innovation, and also it basically invests like for future entrepreneurs, and it also creates an environment of know-how. So those are really like good things because of the fact that I wouldn't be sitting here where I am today if it wasn't for Rocket Internet experience. It was like a great school like of entrepreneurship after my MBA studies. And because of the fact that the model for the high level, it was like given, like will it be Amazon, eBay, like kind of models, like, and then what you were trying to solve is how do I find the fit for the market that I am in? And then you had the capital as well, which is also another big portion of like a burden for entrepreneurs, how to be able to attract capital. As long as you deliver your KPIs, you had more money to come in. And that was like a great way for creating entrepreneurs or entrepreneur-minded people to be much more capable by making them doing it in a high growth startup. So that created a lot of like future founders from Rocket Internet that they are doing great things. But even from the ecosystem point of view, if you look at it, they did it in Southeast Asia, Latin America, Africa, and that created like a lot of like the foundation of like entrepreneurs because it was quite new in that era. And that even created like a spotlight for investors to look into. Is it right to invest? Because there's a very good saying that the hedge fund founder told us back then, there's always money available in the ecosystem. The question is there money for you or not? Like so in that way, like the reason that the certain countries attract more capital is because investors can see they can put the money and they can like make a good return. That's why they keep investing. Same with the businesses, the same mindset. And in that regard, like even it created like a fostered like innovation in Berlin. Like I think, I mean, I would like maybe quite easily say that even though I'm not living in Berlin, but I can see it created a lot of fostering for innovation and entrepreneurship, and it made Berlin in one of the hot spots for like investors to invest in those startups. And basically Rocket Internet like became a big enabler for that. And for the corporate venture roads, like how we also see in my experiences, there are two types. Like one is more affiliated with the like businesses itself. So therefore, like it's the employees, same more or less employees, like a bit more independent, but same employees, and they have like the more or less integrated in the ecosystem much more. And the other version that I see when I interact with them is sometimes like completely only the money is the common denominator. They even start to get more LPs to be able to like grow to the next level, but the initial capital comes from the like corporate, especially like I see it depends a bit more I think industry wise. In the finance world, I see more the latter, where like they completely span out their investment arms like as it scales. But I think in certain industries, it makes more sense to have it more integrated with the like main company. So that is like what I see. But regardless of that, even that is a very big enabler as well, because you always, once you have the product market fit and execution, maybe just to elaborate a bit more, it comes to a level once you have the product market fit. The next most important thing to be able to crack is execution. Execution always comes from people, like the company's people. So in that way, can you attract great people and can you retain them? So like that is very important question, because as a leader, if you cannot attract like great talent with different skill sets and different experience levels, that company will not reach its full potential. And to be able to like, that is very important. And then other part to scale further will be the distribution, where then you partner like with like different stakeholders. And in this case, like the industry leaders in each industry are a great enabler for distribution. And then you bring like some of the innovation and agility from your side. They bring their expertise, know-how, and reach, and it creates a great win-win environments, as we see usually across the board.
I mean, no doubt, Ercin, that it's, as you say, it's about people and execution. But what I find it about Rocket Internet, what I find really smart is that if you think about the model, is that they build a very systematic way of building ventures. It's almost a framework, a replicated framework, and that just completely saved the time and also obviously overall the resources of launching these ventures. And hence, because of that, it's also reducing the overall failure or the risk of failure. So that's just my kind of my 2 cents on that one, just from looking at different venture studios. But Lars, you from your perspective and from BSH Startup Kitchen perspective, you're not necessarily building these ventures, but you are looking at outside of your company essentially to partner with startups. Should corporations try to do this internally, or should they look for external enablers?
I mean, that's a good question. It might always depend on what kind of like innovation you're looking for and what you want to get out of it, right? So, I mean, for us, we choose that way to actually organize most of the things ourselves. Like with the Startup Kitchen, what we do is that we run a program to, it's not accelerated, but getting close to that. So like depending on individual challenges that we have within the company, where we see that we are lacking resources or like capabilities to do it ourselves, we're looking for the right startup, and then we're orchestrating this exchange. And many, like most of the things we do, they're like focused on the core, like improving our core business, maybe like with a very short-term perspective, like a mid or long-term perspective. So there it does really make sense to have an external partner, because like we know our core business, our people know like our experts, they know what they're looking for. We help them to find the right partner and then to manage that exchange. And that's, as I was saying here, it's really crucial to know the details on how your organization works, to make the first collaboration and the first interaction between the startup and the corporate as good as you can. Like build a personal relationship. It's in the end, it's all about persons, right? So we talk about companies, but companies do not exist. People exist. People working in these companies exist. They work together.
Yeah.
And so you got to make a really, in a way, you got to make a good first impression from both sides so that you want to continue working. And of course, it's also about the product, of course, what you want to build. But getting this to work, that's super crucial. And I guess if you think about core business innovations, that's something we can do ourselves. If you're thinking on the other side to introduce new business models where you actually might not even know what you want to have, and you know that you don't have the right people, the right setup, the right tools, no expertise in how to build and scale these kind of solutions, you certainly need some external help. And that's why I'm a big fan of venture studios and what you want to call them, that help you build these or like develop these ideas. So, and I think we've seen that many times that corporates think that this must be a great idea that the customer wants to have, but in the end, the customer doesn't really care. You only care as a corporate because you're so much in your own world with your very limited perspective. And this is where I think like an external partner can create tremendous value, like challenging your idea, putting together a team. I'm a big fan of like, of course, like teams that have like some external hires and also like some internal experts that can help you to bridge the gap between what you really want and how you actually also make it a success after on.
Yeah.
Because like it's not only about taking the first step, it's also about what do you do once this venture has been successful. So that's for corporate a big challenge. Where does it sit in the organization? How do you have the right team?
It's a huge question about corporate
governance. How do you hire the right people Do you have the right incentive scheme? These are things you got to be making up your mind, and you got to be really managing wisely and be willing to, take the investment. I mean, it takes top management support all along the way and a long breath. And innovation is not a short run. It's like a marathon, like a half marathon. At least.
I love that. I love that one. And I think you just hit the nail on the head, I guess, with most of the times. I think these disruptive ideas that you talked about, the reason they're failing or shut down, it's mostly, leadership moves on, strategy changes, but budgets get reallocated. But if I may sort of summarize both of your points. So Ercin, your point about the team, and Lars, everything you said about also the processes and the team. For anyone that is listening and it's coming from a corporate background, or maybe part of the innovation department, or even thinking about setting up one, maybe quite superficial, high level, I would say that maybe there's 3 or 4 aspects to think about whether deciding to do it internally or partnering externally with someone else. I think one would be a bit about the industry. So as Ercin said, is a field I want to improve through corporate venturing part of my core business? Then back to the talent, do I own a skilled team and proven processes to work with these people? And then do I have access to, a greater deal flow of opportunities in the field that I want to improve? And I think most importantly, probably that should have been the first, is this more cost effective? Which one is most cost effective to do it, to run it? And just with this point, I want to turn towards some of the questions which probably you guys can't see. So I'm just going to read them out loud. And I also don't know exactly which question is addressed to whom. So I will just mention it, and please both of you just feel free to answer. The first one is, how can startups enter the corporate world to build these long-term relationships? And what is the best door to go through? I think that this question could be a session in itself, but does anyone want to have a first go at it?
I'm happy to start. Like for our company, I would be the best door. So like having a dedicated program to go to. Yes. But I mean, like as this is a general question, like it's so super hard, and I don't have the answer. Like you should be looking for someone with a dedicated role to take care of it. It doesn't really make sense to run around, like collect business cards on fairs, which is no longer happening these days. But like when I first took over this role like 2 years ago, I spoke to some startups, and they were saying that we're already in touch with you as a company, and like, but who?
Oh,
and, like,
yeah.
They were given like 12 different names, and like I knew right away they're all the wrong contacts, right? And so they're wasting a lot of time talking to these people. Our colleagues are wasting their time talking to the startup, and it's hard. Like I don't have the answer. We have, like, some companies have a dedicated vehicle. We have it as well. That's the right way to do it. Other than that, you got to be super lucky, or you should not do it.
I think that's probably the first sort of, I guess, clue for a startup to really look out for. If the company is in your field, obviously, and do they have some sort of accelerator, or do they have a dedicated person? I think you answered the question. So, Ercin, what do you think? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it really depends. Like, why I say it depends is it depends on the stage of the startup that you are in. Because in the earlier stages that we are in, actually, we have to find out which kind of accelerators or corporate programs are the right fit for us, and we just apply. And in today's world, all these programs are out there, so for you to find out, and we just of course apply to the areas that is relevant to the finance functions, as far as Lydia is concerned. But as we get bigger, then we start to get inbounds from these large companies. And depends on your model as well, because our model is we partner with large enterprises to basically finance their retail arms. So therefore, as the word gets out, as we get the momentum, you get a lot of inbounds. So that is the part that we experience. So that's why I said it depends on the stage of the company.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm trying to see how I can phrase it nicely, but if you are, if you're a good startup, normally corporates will hunt you down. It's the other way around. And one last thing, which I'm not sure if it's necessarily a question, is more of an idea. Someone really liked our very short dialogue about failure. So this is just this is a proposition, I think, to everyone listening and to us. A failure/test fund from corporates to startups to, I guess, to innovate. So corporates creating a fund just for startups to test and I guess try to see if they can fail or they succeed. But I guess that's really what all this acceleration and innovation programs are about, right?
It should still be fun to succeed in the end, not as fun to fail. But yeah, I mean, that's what it's there for. I mean, you at least you got to find a sponsor. I mean, just have some funny money to play around with. Like, that's something we don't do. Like, we always look for a sponsor who's funding the project, funding the activities, because then you can be sure that it really is hitting a business need. And other than that, like, I think we've seen that as well in many other examples. You sort of like having like innovation lab that's so like not connected to the rest of the company. No one really cares.
So I think having an innovation lab is the perfect failure fund.
Kind of.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. I see Ciprian is here with us. So that's a sign that we are wrapping up. This was twice as long as we thought, but honestly, I think we could have spent another hour and we still have things to chat about. Pleasure to have you both, and thank you so much for taking the time. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Ciprian, over to you.
I don't have a question. I have an invitation.
Okay, shoot, tell us.
A lot of questions. The question with the door, I really liked it. You know, finding the right doors for startups to enter corporations, not just for the sake of the startup, but also for the sanity of the corporation. The question that I have and the invitation is to reflect in another session, maybe in December, January, on this. Who keeps the door open? And more importantly, who facilitates the conversation? Because this, you know, a lot of corporates and a lot of startups, they speak different languages. They have different expectations and to some extent even different values, not opposing. So the negotiator, the translator is also critical. Like we are, like Diana is to some extent, to a large extent. So thanks a lot for joining us in
Very kind.
I'm sure Tanya enjoyed it as well. And I'm very happy to have this type of conversation in the summit as well. So best of luck to all of us in bringing these worlds closer. And you know, I'm not saying uniting the worlds, but I'm saying, you know, speeding up some processes. Thanks a lot. We're going to go to the next session in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.